Late in a sparring session, the fatigue sets in. You throw a punch, and instead of a crisp snap, your arm drags through the air. Your guard drops, leaving you entirely exposed. This is a familiar wall for athletes crossing over from traditional fitness. You bring your standard arm day routine into the boxing gym, expecting that adding strength to your arms will translate directly into hitting harder and faster. Instead, you experience the exact opposite. After a few rounds, your arms feel like lead weights. You can't keep your hands glued to your chin, and returning your fist to your face becomes a grueling effort. The root of this problem comes from a misunderstanding of how striking works. The assumption is that tighter, highly developed bicep muscles will automatically force the arm forward with greater velocity. Biologically, the bicep is a pulling muscle. It contributes absolutely zero forward momentum or driving force to your strike. Packing on raw aesthetic mass through traditional isolation lifts actually works against your kinetic velocity. You eventually have to make a choice between looking like a bodybuilder or moving like a fighter. Elite hand speed relies on a very precise biological sequence: relax, explode, and relax again. When you try to hit hard by flexing your arm muscles before the strike even begins, you disrupt that sequence. You are applying continuous tension exactly when the limb needs to be loose. That pre-tension means your triceps and biceps are fighting against each other. You end up draining your own energy reserves to push your arm forward, while simultaneously telegraphing your intention to your opponent. We can see how this works mechanically in this 2D skeletal model of a punch. Notice how the bicep stays inactive as the arm extends. It only lights up at the end of the motion, acting as a physical brake. Once the punch lands, the bicep instantly transitions into its secondary role, acting like a loaded spring pulling the fist backward into a defensive posture. If those springs are exhausted from carrying unnecessary mass or constant tension, your ability to throw fast combinations disappears. Your retraction slows down, leaving your chin hanging in the air. Treating the bicep as the engine rather than a rapid retraction spring breaks your striking mechanics and leaves you vulnerable to a counter right hand. The most common culprit behind this mechanical breakdown is the heavy, slow, grinding bicep curl. This exercise does exactly what it is designed to do. It maximizes time under tension and isolates the muscle fibers to trigger aesthetic hypertrophy. But the cost of that isolation is steep. Training exclusively this way creates persistent arm tightness. It limits the mobility of your elbow joint and completely destroys the relaxation speed required to snap your punches. To understand which exercises actually help, we can map out arm training methodologies on this chart. We are measuring the tension and mass of a lift against its velocity and comparing that to its actual carryover into combat sports. Heavy, slow curls sit firmly in the bottom left. They provide intense muscular tension, but offer negligible benefit to your actual punch mechanics. This presents a harsh reality for crossover athletes. To get your athletic snapback, you have to intentionally lower the weight and sacrifice peak muscle isolation. To develop high hand speed, you have to abandon ego lifting entirely and prioritize exercises that integrate the whole kinetic chain. If your primary goal is pure velocity, then the explosive band curl shown here is your best alternative. Resistance bands offer a unique mechanical advantage. They provide increasing tension as the band stretches, which perfectly matches the activation curve of your fast-twitch muscle fibers. The limitation is that bands will not give you absolute strength. They function purely as an accelerator to train your nervous system to fire quickly. But combat isn't only about speed. If you are competing in mixed martial arts, you also need heavy clinch control and grueling grappling endurance. For that specific demand, hanging a pair of towels over a pull-up bar and performing towel chin-ups is incredibly effective. It develops crushing grip strength and the precise wrist control needed to manipulate an opponent. The biological cost of towel chin-ups is high. They heavily tax your central nervous system and quickly drain the endurance from your forearms. Because of this, timing is critical. If you perform heavy towel pull-ups right before a technical sparring session, your hands will be too exhausted to grip an opponent or maintain a solid guard. You can't just pick exercises at random. You have to evaluate your own combat deficit, whether you lack acceleration or grappling durability, and select the specific tool that fixes it. If you need a balanced approach that builds structural arm durability without compromising your joint mobility, the hammer curl is the optimal middle ground. By keeping your wrist in a neutral position, the hammer curl actively recruits the brachialis muscle. This thickens the lower part of the arm and improves overall elbow stability, which is vital for absorbing the impact of heavy strikes. In a crossbody hammer curl, the arm moves diagonally across the torso, a path that mimics the inward rotation used in striking. By training this specific vector, you strengthen the arm in the same plane of motion used to stabilize and retract your strikes. This coordination helps the bicep better manage the rotational forces at play when you are throwing hooks or crosses at high speed. To make this work, the execution rules must be strict. You need an explosive, fast upward phase, followed immediately by a highly controlled 2-second lowering phase. The moment you allow momentum or body swinging to take over the lift, the exercise loses its athletic value and turns right back into a useless ego lift. By simply shifting the angle of your wrist and controlling the tempo, you adapt a basic isolation movement into an effective punch recovery mechanism. In reality, a serious combat athlete's schedule is already packed with heavy bag work, drilling, and sparring. You have very little time left over for isolation work. Let's determine your priority with this flowchart. Transitioning from bodybuilding, follow pure speed and use explosive band curls. MMA fighters need grappling, focusing on towel chin-ups. Only have time for one movement? Take the maximum ROI path. The explosive underhand chin-up wins the return on investment analysis. In one fluid motion, you are training your grip, stabilizing your upper back, overloading your bicep retraction, and building total upper body pulling power. The trade-off is the fatigue. This is a highly demanding compound movement. To prevent overtraining, you have to strictly program your rest days around it. If you want elite punch velocity, you have to change how you view your arms. Stop building them as static, heavy showpieces, and start training them to be the dynamic, explosive springs they need to be.